So wealth transfer is making sure that a surviving spouse has what they need because they will be in a more oppressive, usually 99% of the time, a more oppressive tax situation. They will have completely different RMD structures. They will have all kinds of different elements that they deal with financially, on top of the fact they've just lost their life partner.
When it comes to your estate and your legacy plan, do you have the 5 Ds down? 5 Ds of estate planning is what we're going to cover here today on The Retirement Solution. Estate planning is one of the pillars that you believe must be incorporated into every plan that you build.
Absolutely.
I guess does estate planning, wealth transfer that's where estate planning begins. That's kind of the first step of. No, that's not
Yeah,
right.
no, no, it's a good point. So most people that have a will, they think, their estate plan is done. What we realized over the years is that when we have our clientele, the first time that there's kind of a big shift is unfortunately when we lose a spouse.
Right.
So what we realized is there's wealth transfer that happens long before a will is really ever executed, right?
Okay.
So that's why instead of calling it estate planning or dealing with wills, we actually call it wealth transfer.
Got it.
Because what we learned over the years is, and let's just use this as an example, because I remember the exact couple when I realized we needed to incorporate this into our firm. So these had been clients for years and years and years, and unfortunately, wonderful couple. They were probably in their late 70s, early 80s, and the husband passed away. Wonderful guy, hated it so much, it was terrible. What we saw then for the very first time, because they told me everything, and this was probably 18, 19 years ago. They told me everything. And so when I saw all of a sudden that when the assets went from joint assets to just go to the surviving spouse, all of a sudden we had different tax consequences. We had different RMD consequences. We had different issues that came with home ownership. We had all kinds of different things
Yeah.
that we had never addressed. We had never discussed because they had a will, right? They had a will. I'm like, what? We're not lawyers. We don't do that. My dad was a lawyer, but I didn't do that. And so how would that involve me? But what I realized is all the other things, we had to change assets. We had to change income structures. We had to change tax design. We had to do everything. And I realized, oh my gosh, this could have all been avoided and they could have been in substantially better situations had we had an actual wealth transfer plan, not a will, wealth transfer. And all wealth transfer is just making certain that if anything happens to derail the plan, you get incapacitated, right? Or you have to go to an assisted living facility, or you cannot make decisions on your own, or you don't want to be hooked up on a machine for life support. All of those things can be handled long before they ever happen. They can be
Right.
decided so that when we're in those situations, and I hate to say it, but it's true. It's not if, but sadly, when we're in those situations, we don't have to worry about what to do now.
Right.
We simply worry about how do we make sure that everyone's taken care of, we're getting the best treatment we can. We don't have to worry about finances. We don't have to take any extra measures because we already know once this happens, this triggers this and it's automated. And it's
Okay.
going to be the best thought process. So wealth transfer is making sure that a surviving spouse has what they need because they will be in a more oppressive, usually 99% of the time, a more oppressive tax situation. They will have completely different RMD structures based on their ages. They will have all kinds of different elements that they deal with financially, on top of the fact they've just lost their life partner. And that is overwhelming enough for most people. So in our process, we go through very simply, number one, we want to make sure that of all the assets, this is for all retirement, 5 pillars. Number one, protect what we got. Doesn't mean put it under the mattress. We just need to know how it's protected. Number two, develop the income stream. Number three, have a tax strategy that works. Number four is wealth transfer. And then number 5 is healthcare directives, making sure that even though I do not love long-term care insurance, we need to know how would we pay for that. Unfortunately, not if, but when it does happen, we want to make sure we're being tax efficient, right?
Got it.
So when we're thinking about wealth transfer, it's a big deal. And by the way, almost all of it, even if you have a great will, it has nothing to do with it. And that's why they talk about the 5 Ds
Yeah.
of estate planning, essentially the 5 Ds. Go through those, Heather.
Yeah, let's dive into this a little bit deeper
Yeah.
regarding that particular pillar covering your estate planning. Kiplinger.com says an easy way to make sure that you're covered in this space is to remember the 5 Ds.
Yep.
Dependence, divorce, downsizing, disability, and death.
Sure.
You brought up having a will.
Yeah.
Do these things, can they all be covered by a will? Or maybe the 6th D we got to bring to the conversation, the documentation we need. Is it not so covered by a will? What do we need then?
So if you think about it, all a will just says who gets what you got when you die, and it establishes your executor, who basically who's in charge. That's
Yeah.
it. It doesn't do anything else.
Oh,
That is all it does, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with disability, doesn't have anything to do with divorce, doesn't have anything to do with downsizing, doesn't have anything to do with most of those other things. Healthcare directives. Do you want to be hooked up on a machine or do you not?
right.
How do you want to live those rest of your life? If you're incapacitated, like my father had a stroke. He could not make he lasted for 9 more years, thank
Mhm.
goodness, but he could not make financial decisions. So that's where we had to have, and think about it, a will would not have helped there. We needed to actually have things. So if you have a will, it doesn't do anything really while you're still alive. So disability, divorce, or downsizing, it doesn't help at all. Now, what it does do is it deals with your death and the dependents. Who gets what when you're gone? Once those assets are done that way, you have no control, right? So a lot of people, this is where we say, now let's talk about a trust or let's talk about a living trust. Some people have living wills. We'll go to that here in just a second. But one of the things we all have, two things we have to have. We have to have a financial power of attorney with that will. And it's usually not included in the will. Usually it's not. This says that if you were incapacitated, unfortunately, you had a stroke and you can't make sound judged decisions,
Yeah.
who is then allowed to do that? Is it going to be your spouse? Does it need to be one of your children? Does it need to be your brother or sister? Who is it? Because you want to have that established beforehand. Someone to guide, maybe a surviving spouse or the spouse, to guide them in making those decisions.
Mhm.
I don't often think it's great to have a financial advisor in that capacity. As a matter of fact, I think it's not good. So
Okay.
this is where you want to have a solid family member that can actually help give guidance, right? That's important, super important. So a living will can accomplish that because it has those advanced directives. If you do have a disability, then it will make certain that you understand financial decisions. And then if you want to be on life support or not, they're all done. So you can have that done. Living trusts will actually do a lot of that too. So if you have those in place, you're better off. Now,
Okay.
here's what I think most people need to have. I think they need to have an actual wealth transfer plan. And
Right.
what this basically
Does
states
that
is
include a will?
it can. I prefer living trusts is
Okay.
what I prefer. Now,
Okay.
there's a difference. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to have a trust because it gives me different tax consequences. No, it does not. It has to be irrevocable or irrevocable, whatever anyone says. I think they're both technically correct.
Pecan or pecan?
Right, right. Tomato, tomato, right?
Yeah.
That is the only one that have a tax consequence. Now, most people, unless you were worth 5, 6, 7, 8+ million dollars, most people do not need an irrevocable trust. They don't. They really
Okay.
don't, because all of your assets can be transferred very easily and simply with beneficiary claims and other things that we can do that are a lot less costly, and you have total control of your money, right?
Okay.
But
Yep.
a living trust gives us the opportunity to basically have the will, but you can state other things. You can state, hey, this is the amount of money that I want to go to the kids. I don't want them to get all $9 million all at once. I want them to only get $250,000 a year for each year that they're employed, or la 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 la. It can't go to any divorced person from the family, not your children, but like if they were
Yeah, the
married with
spouse.
someone
Yeah.
and that spouse is no longer involved, but it can go down to children. The thing I like about living trusts is that
Yeah.
you can make decisions as you want to. They can change and be fluid, just like our lives. They don't have any different tax consequences. Some people don't like that, but frankly, I think it's fine. But it will solve a lot of the other issues. And if it's done ahead of time, no one has to worry. No one has the anxiety. No one has that feeling like there's just this huge elephant on their shoulder
Got
when
it.
they're going through the grieving process or going through the situation, right? Because again, my father passed away, but he had 9 years after he had a stroke, where unfortunately my mother blew through about $600,000 of money that he had saved.
But she had to pour it into his care.
He was gone, yeah, for in-home care because she
Yeah.
couldn't tolerate the idea of him being in a facility. She wanted him there with him, but she couldn't do it on her
Understandable.
own. So they went through almost all of his retirement savings, which was insult to injury
Yeah.
because we didn't know how to plan for that back in the day. This was years and years and years ago. It came out of his IRA that he had saved for both of them. So when the money was coming out, it was basically compound taxed in that same situation. So it just made a bad situation. So we work our way around those now. So when we're thinking about if we have a will, Is that enough? And here's the thing, if you don't know what you really want to do, living trust gives you ultimate flexibility. I'm not saying go out and getting a living trust, but this would be one of those times to call our office, find out, are you in the right spot? What should you do? Because believe it or not, wealth transfer is the fourth pillar. Protection, income, tax design all take precedence until we get there. But once we get there, we don't want any of those rules that we're going to do with the trust to overwrite the three more important parts, right? So that's why we do it in order. But by doing that correctly, not only will you have much more comfort in making better decisions, you'll know that you should not have anything other than taking care of that person in that situation or taking care of yourself to grieve properly. You will not have to worry about financial decisions until it's truly important that you do that. That is worth a lot. Peace of mind.